What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Shadowstorm here. Yeet! Back with another video. Today is another podcast, my second one, and this is a creature feature podcast where me and two guests will be talking about different mythological creatures, cryptids, and other mythological beasts. And today I have again a returning guest, Sarah, Mystic Sparklewings, and my friend and future scientist, Zach Grimm. How are you
Hello.
guys doing?
Hello.
As we were supposed to start a lot earlier, but due to some not so minor complications, we had to be pushed back until we found a very obvious in our face solution. So, why don't we get started? I have given both Sarah and Zach a list of creatures that they could do research on and surprise me with info about them, like their culture, their history, and all of that. And I will bring the list up right here. They have gone over together on the order that they would go in. So, I don't know who's doing what since the order seems to have been changed, so I guess we can start with the Kraken. Oh, sorry, Sarah, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would actually. Could you call me Mystic, please?
Mystic. Mystic Sparkle Wings.
Yeah, and I think Zach actually was gonna go first.
Okay, we have first up the Kraken. So, if you want,
Yeah.
you can take it away.
No, actually, surprise ball. This one's a surprise ball because these two were debunked, and I didn't want to tell you until the actual podcast to see your reaction. So these weren't
Okay.
added to the list just for that reason.
Oh, okay. So
So
they've been
the first
debunked
one
in a
is the
good way?
flying rod.
Oh,
No, so the flying rod is an elongated visual effect, thought to be a extra-dimensional worm thing, um, but it was quickly debunked by many people as being motion blurs and optical illusions found in recordings and photos. A team of scientists in Tongua Zenguo, a pharmaceutical company, and they they tried capturing these creatures, and they only found moths and flying insects.
that would make sense. I have heard that it was moths and flying insects creating these, like delusions within camera footage where it would glitch and they would leave these paths that were ribbon-like. Though I did think that people said they were UFOs and stuff, or like some sort of weird lights or lightning.
Yeah, I thought I looked it up when you brought it up just to see, and I
I mean,
like the first thing I saw was that it had been debunked. One of them had been debunked as like fireworks.
mm, yeah, that's the next one, the black smoke ring.
That's the one.
So this one um, is seen in areas of the UK and in the US. It's this giant black smoke ring in the sky, but this has also been debunked because there's a video of it. People have recreated the similar effect using fireworks. It starts off small and then eventually grows and gets larger as it goes into the atmosphere.
That's funny because I tried to look up these creatures before giving them to my guests before researching, and I haven't found any videos that showed fireworks doing the same effect. They would just create clouds of smoke and whatever. But maybe that you guys found some that were set off during the day, and I only saw videos of fireworks at night.
Yeah,
And it
Oh,
it probably depends on what kind too, and if they were like homebrew
yeah. There
fireworks.
was there was a different instance when another black smoke.
Ah,
Oh, I didn't look at the different types of fireworks. But there was another one, another instance this was seen, and it was actually seen right after a transformer exploded. Um,
ah,
so
I've also heard that's another way that ball lightning is created, so that could make sense. It could create black smoke rings as well. So I guess that debunks the flying
yeah,
rods and the
there was
smoke
actually
rings.
funny.
You were saying,
Yeah, there was actually pretty funny though because in 2016 there was a film called Arrival, and
oh
the
yes, I know
similar
which one.
effect happened in this movie, and this is how the aliens communicated with Earth. So either the movie was created because of these rings,
Arrival,
or
the
these rings were
movie,
created because of the movie.
Arrival, the movie where the woman wants to like interact and talk with the aliens that come in that weird oval ship that had the Hawkeye as one of the actors. That's what he was doing instead of Civil War. Okay, what's next on the list? Because I don't appear to have the same list as you guys do.
No, you should have the same one from here on out. We just wanted to keep the debunked ones a surprise. So next is the
Ah, okay.
Kraken,
Okay, good.
and it's me. And I'm actually, in my research, I found that actually one of my better sources was this book, The Element Encyclopedia of Magical Creatures by John and Caitlin Matthews. And I went through and I was trying to reword a lot of the stuff, and I'm like, but the book already did it better. So that's where I'm going to be reading most of mine off of. You can see I've got it marked off here.
Oh, yes.
So, okay.
Any research is good.
Okay, so I'm just going to read off what they have for the Kraken here, and then we can go from there. So, Kraken, the terrifying sea monster from the legends of Scandinavia, also known as the Krabben and Sky Kraken. The Kraken is described as being of great length and breadth with a number of fins and tentacles extending from the side of its body. The monster's favorite trick was to encircle passing ships with its enormous body and drag them beneath the water. This action created a whirlpool so that anything that escaped from its initial attack was sucked under. The Kraken has a taste for human flesh and was so vast that it could consume an entire fishing fleet, boats and men, at one time. The amber washed up around the shores of the North Sea was said to be its excrement. When not attacking its prey, the Kraken lay on the surface of the sea, and like the Fasticalon and Absidolone of seafaring lore, it was often mistaken for a floating island. Unwary mariners who attempted to land on its back and to light cooking fires soon learnt the errors of their ways. Despite their fear of it, fishermen noted that large schools of smaller fish always seemed to swim before it, so that those brave enough to risk the Kraken's jaws were able to secure a notable catch. In the 1680s, a kraken was reported stranded on the coast of Norway, while a local tradition at Rothesay in the Kyles of Bute, Scotland, claims that a kraken was washed ashore in 1775. The description of an 18th century book, The Natural History of Norway, includes mention of how the kraken turned the sea dark with a discharge of liquid, suggesting that what the author of this book may have been describing was either an octopus or a cuttlefish of unusual size. The English poet Alfred, Lord Tennyson, while still a young man, wrote of the Kraken. And
Wow.
that's the end of that. And when I was looking it up, me and Zach have actually been watching this show called Mythical Beasts, and they did an episode on the Kraken. And when I saw that, they focused primarily on it being just a giant squid. But in my research, I found there's actually this breed of octopus called the Dumbo octopus that's got little flaps on the side of its head. And that, in conjunction with some of the other things about the kraken, like the behavior of octopi, they like to stay on the ocean floor, wherever that is, whether it's near the shoreline or way down deep in the ocean. Meanwhile, squids just like open water. So I think it is possible that if the Kraken is actually out there, it may not be a giant squid like most people have been assuming. It may actually be an octopus.
That is good to know. And that, I guess, in a way, it is technically real. It's just an unusually large squid or octopus.
Right.
Have people caught one of these before?
They've captured like the giant squids. And that was actually one of the things from that episode of Mythical Beasts is they had one preserved that was really, really old that they were using as more or less their evidence or example. And I didn't like that because part of the way because some of the things they took note of, like, because that when you saw it on camera, the thing looked really old and torn up, and it just didn't strike me as very good evidence. And I think they said something about the eyes, and I'm like, so you're assuming that those giant gaping holes were eyes or something? I forget exactly what it was, but
Well, I guess this means we bring on to our next of the sea creatures, Nessie, one of the few that actually has a name.
yes, and that one was also mine. And so same thing, same book. I'm gonna read off here, and then we'll go from there. Loch Ness Monster. The famous Scottish water monster, affectionately known as Nessie, had its first recorded appearance in the life of Saint Columba, the 6th century saint from Ireland, who founded the monastery of Iona. The Life calls the monster Aquilatus Bestia, which seems to be the Latin translation of the Gaelic all-purpose term Piest. Today, the monster excites a great deal of attention, with coachloads of visitors disembarking in the hope of seeing the distinct V-wave that heralds Nessie's appearance. The many sightings speak of a 30-foot body with humps that undulate beneath the surface of the water, and occasionally the eel-like or serpentine head of the creature can be seen peering up. Several teams of scientists, naturalists, and cryptozoologists have monitored the loch, keeping watch using radar and ultrasound to detect any motion. Prehistoric survival arguments cite the plesiosaur as a possible origin for the monster. Nessie may be the only aquatic monster to have her own website. Many films have been made featuring Nessie, including The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes and the more recent Loch Ness. And Zach will tell you, I actually came up with kind of a harebrained scheme that is definitely going way off the deep end of how Nessie could actually still be maybe a real plesiosaur.
Please do tell.
I don't take much stock in the idea myself, but so I know from school that deep down at like the bottom of the ocean, I have no idea if this would apply to the bottom of a loch, but at the bottom of the ocean there are these plants. They don't get any sunlight. So instead of doing photosynthesis to survive, they do chemosynthesis off of like the chemicals from like the volcanic vents down there.
Oh yeah, I have heard about that.
Yeah, so my crazy
And of
harebrained...
course, with only like 5% of the ocean so far being fully explored and discovered, I would not be surprised if there were some like large beasts out there that haven't been found.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with the Kraken. So my crazy harebrained scheme for Nessie was that, and again, I'm not even sure how much stock I take in this, was that maybe somehow, back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth plentifully, there actually were plesiosaurs that lived in that lake, and maybe there was an egg that was laid that got preserved, and it didn't hatch until more recent years because of the volcanic vent activity or something. I don't even know if that's possible in the loch. And then without, parents to take care of it, the baby eventually died. Because if you look it up, probably the most famous picture of Nessie, they've never been able to determine if it was actually a hoax or not. Um,
Of course, many sightings have also been said to be pieces of driftwood. That's probably the most famous thing that I have heard.
right, and there was one guy that took pictures of Nessie that eventually admitted on like his deathbed that it was a hoax. But there's one picture that they've tested it a lot and they still don't really know what is actually in that picture. And if you look it up, um, there's a whole Wikipedia page on it. When I first saw that picture, I thought it was maybe somebody had just painted Nessie on, because I know that if you look at like 1800s pictures of Victorian ladies, they would actually paint over the picture sometimes to make their waists, like when they wore corsets, look even more insanely small.
Oh yeah, I have heard about that.
Yeah, so I thought maybe that was the case, but actually the thing in the picture that's presumed to be Nessie is still there in the negatives, so that's not possible. But the thing about it is the picture is usually cropped so that Nessie looks a lot bigger. That's why I
Yes.
say that if it is a real plesiosaur somehow, it was probably a baby that got preserved somehow and didn't hatch until recently, and so without its parents to take care of it, the
Of
reason
course, the only thing I could think of is that the egg was fossilized, but that would be like a rock hard shell for it to break out of.
it could have been potentially maybe frozen and then thawed, but I don't know how that would work in the lock in particular.
Or fossilized in, because like there
Well,
are
once it's
some
fossilized,
rocks
you
like
can't
amber or something,
once something's fossilized, you can't unfossilize it though.
or like frozen somehow, like in
Yeah,
amber or
that's
whatever. That
that's fossilizing. You like once it's been fossilized, you can't
ah
bring it back to life. It's dead. It's gone. But that's why we haven't been able to
yeah,
bring back the
frozen would
dinosaurs.
make sense.
But yeah, so that's my crazy harebrained scheme. I have no idea if it's even possible, so I don't even. I think there's a very slim chance, but I think it's more likely if something like that did happen, it would probably be in like the open ocean and not a lock.
Ah, well, guess that brings us to the megalodon, the prehistoric shark.
And that one was Zach's.
Yeah, so this one was really interesting, because I just kind of like thought of stuff and to try to make it real, and then it kind of all fit together as how it could be real still. Because I mean, it was real at one point,
Yes.
prehistoric creature. But a megalodon means big tooth, and it was thought to go extinct before the Ice Age. Essentially, as soon as the Ice Age started, they started dying out.
Oh my
That's what
gosh,
they
your
believe anyway.
camera.
Scientists.
Your
What?
camera had a super issue where it went like dark, like almost a negative effect.
I told you I wasn't crazy earlier when it went green.
My bad. As you, like I said, viewers, we've had many issues. Please continue.
So scientists believe it could reach up to 100 feet, so that's pretty massive compared to modern days sharks. Um, they actually have. I mean, in my research, I couldn't find anything about how long people think their lifespan was, so we have no idea how long they could live up to.
I have like
Um,
heard somewhere
they
where it
were
was like
believed to
hundreds
co-evolve.
or thousands of years. I've heard varying lifespans.
So, Megalodon is actually believed to co-evolved with whales as their principal food source. They can sustain themselves. They liked warmth and they hunted in shallow seas. Um, but during the Ice Age, it said that the water levels decreased and started locking up at the poles. and the whales went to the poles. So this is how the sharks died off. Supposedly, is
poles-
because their food source disappeared.
I guess you mean the poles as in like North and South Pole.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, he totally meant tennis poles.
So, but as you said earlier,
What?
we've only really explored 5% of the ocean's floors,
True.
and the oceans make up 70% of the total surface area on Earth. And then this is where I started implementing my theory, because this is kind of where everything fell into place. I thought the Mariana Trench, if the poles started, the water level started going down, then that means the area of the Mariana Trench would have gone down as well. And it's actually funny because there's an island near the Mariana Trench, and the Mariana Trench itself is located near the equator, which would be the warmest area during the Ice Age. And so there's already giant squid in this area. If the water levels decreased, the megalodon could have retreated to these areas and started feeding on the giant squid in the trench. And the Ice Age only really ended around maybe 12, 13,000 years ago. So they've had a very long time to adjust and adapt to their new environment and their new feeding grounds. Especially since the water levels eventually rise back up and the pressure started building up again in the trench, they would have been able to survive and adapt to it.
If they supposedly disappeared during the Ice Age, would that mean they could possibly be preserved or frozen in icebergs? Like if you find
I mean,
your way,
they probably
could-
not icebergs, because they wouldn't. They wouldn't have gone that far to get frozen icebergs, but I mean, we only believe they went extinct during the beginning of the Ice Age because we can't find any more fossils during the Ice Age or afterwards. But like I said, if they went to the trench during this time period, we can't even see in the trench. There
true.
could be dozens of fossils in there, and we'd have no idea.
We can only explore so deep at the moment without man-made tools. Do
Which
you
I-
think they? Well, I'm assuming
And
they
that's all I have for
found.
that.
I'm assuming they found some like fossils already that they think are from a megalodon, like giant teeth or even an entire jaw that can fit a couple of people inside it. But I don't think I've ever seen any museum with a full-on
Yeah, they've
megalodon
definitely.
skeleton. So there could still be pieces of the bone in those deep areas,
Yeah,
like a graveyard. Well, if that's all you have, that brings us
definitely.
to our furry friend Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, or Yeti, because he goes by many different names and aliases
this one
depending on the
was.
region. This one was a lot, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one was frustrating to write down, because I did write it down, and I wanted to look at the human evolution chart to see different subclasses of humans
That would make
that evolved
sense.
through the years. And I wrote down the entire chart, so a lot of this is useless information, but I did
Hey, it's
find
better
some
than
interesting
no
points in there.
It's better than no information at all. We can still have fun
Yeah,
with
that's
it.
true. So Bigfoot, like you said, has many names and is spotted in a lot of areas of the world. One or a couple of traits that it has in every region of the world, though, that it resides in, that shows intelligence, is that it lives in heavily forested or wooded areas, or places that are hard to get to, and they communicate with each other. And around 600,000 years ago, there's a subspecies of human called Homo heidelbergensis. They lived in Africa and Europe, and they had similar brain capacity to modern day humans. And during this time period, I mean, even thousands of years later, there's still species of human evolving that don't have this capacity like we do, or like this other 600,000-year-old subclass does. So that's interesting to point out.
Of course, there is that missing link that we
There,
have
I
yet
did
to
count
find.
up the different subclasses that I found.
Of course, there is that missing link we are yet to find.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because it's not a missing link. There are 6 different variants of humans that I found in the chart. And this is just the chart that I found and located. There could be more, but this is all that I found. And so my theory that I proposed is that we created a 7th. I mean, again, I'm only looking at this chart. I mean, there's probably more that I'm missing, but I'm looking at this chart that I have here. We could have created a 7th subclass by breeding with the other variants of humans. Because each variant of human has a different body style, build, intelligence, and everything like that.
So
and we all have a
what you're
similar
saying
ancestor
is
in the
this.
theory
So
of
what
the
you're
evolution
saying.
chart.
So you're saying this Bigfoot could have been like created by us and not like naturally made, so to speak.
Well, naturally made in the sense that breeding.
We made, like we forced them to make each other.
Intermingling with other variants.
Yes, so to speak.
Not force, but
Yeah, if they're just breeding, it's not like it's an instinct thing. It's not forcing them.
That's what I always saw breeding as. You're just forcing these two animals to do it, so to speak.
I mean, well, that's like modern day breeding for like dog and cat breeds, but like breeding doesn't necessarily always mean that. It can just be a nice way to say two things, got busy, and animals will naturally breed on instinct. So like,
Right.
This has nothing to do with Bigfoot, but I thought it was funny to point out. Around 18,000 years ago, there was a variant of human called Homo floresiensis. I'm butchering that probably, or they called it hobbit people. These were essentially dwarfs. This is where dwarfs came from. They stand over a meter tall or 3 feet tall, and
So
they
basically,
had
Lord of the
a similar
Rings
brain
stole the
size to
idea.
chimpanzees, but they were able to create advanced. Pretty much, probably, yeah. Or, I mean, they didn't really steal the idea. They probably got it from mythologies, because mythologies also incorporate dwarves into their system.
True. Of course, that would explain how there's like deformities of like size, like midgets are like deformities and disorders.
Yes.
So that like they could get their height
because
from
they called it the dwarfism gene.
Yeah.
Yeah, they called it dwarfism gene, and again, this could be because of the intermingling between the different variants of humans, and the gene was passed down, and that's why they were able to have that. Because I mean, sometimes you have people with dwarfism or gigantism that have these genes but aren't able to cope and live as long because their bodies aren't meant to do that, because it's a passed down gene and they weren't the direct offspring.
True. I guess that's all you got for the Bigfoot. That would bring us to giants.
Yep. Well, let me find it here.
While he's looking, I just want to make a side note.
All right.
All right.
Gi-
You were saying, Sarah.
I had a misconception for years from an old Scooby-Doo movie that Chupacabra was actually another name for Bigfoot, because that's what
I
they treated it
remember
like.
that movie too.
Yeah, but no, we're gonna talk about Chupacabra later. Very different thing from Bigfoot.
I have no idea why they did that.
It was probably just like they wanted to do an episode in Mexico, but explaining a goat sucker in a way that wasn't totally horrifying to children was probably a
That
little
makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of a weird undead dog-like creature, it's just a big hairy one.
Yeah, but spoilers, because we're going to talk about Chupacabra later.
Yes. Yeah, okay. You found giants.
Yep. So, giants are a race of beings. They've been around for thousands of years. They're pretty much in every religion or culture we can find. Again, this is where potentially where modern day gigantism comes from, is because this passed down gene between the different mingling between the different variants. In the Bible, they were called the Nephilim, and they were the children of the fallen angels who mated with
they
humans.
were in the Bible.
And they were essentially the cause.
They were in the
Do what?
Bible.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
They don't go by yeah, they don't go by giants in the Bible. So if you don't know what you're looking for, then you're gonna miss them. But they're called the Nephilim. They were essentially the cause for the flood because they were disgraced essentially on Earth. So they were the main reason why the flood happened in the Bible. Norse mythology takes this a step further, and they say that pretty much giants are the cause of Ragnarok. Ragnarok is going to come. The giants are going to be led by Loki to Asgard and Earth, and they're going to destroy everything.
And I guess the movie Thor, their interpretation would be the frost giants. Because Loki kind of led them.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. The one thing they did get right in that movie, though, was, I mean, they got Hela right, but she wasn't supposed to lead the main attack. It was Loki, and Fenrir, the giant wolf that Hela had, was actually Loki's son, and it was supposed to be him and Fenrir leading the giants to kill the gods.
Well, I think that would be rather safe for a more religious podcast, because you know all about that.
Yeah. In Greek mythology, giants are present as well, but there's also a subclass of giants, the Cyclops. They are still considered giants just because of
That
their
is
size.
actually what I
but they only
wanted
have
to
one
do.
eye. So,
I actually did want to add Cyclops, but didn't know if it really fit.
yeah, so the giants are called Earthborn, or the name Gigantes means Earthborn because they were the children of Gaia, or the Earth, Mother Earth. And some opposed the gods, some came to oppose the gods later on, and some of them got brutally killed in many different ways. But there were a couple of good ones too. I mean, not all giants are bad, because Hephaestus, the god of the blacksmiths and volcanoes, himself had worked with 3 Cyclops, which Zeus released from Tartarus and had them craft the 3 main gods' weapons: the Helm of Hades, the Thunderbolt of Zeus, and Poseidon's Trident. So they did help do that. And Zeus, Poseidon himself even had Cyclops children. So not all giants are bad, just a certain few. And there are skeletons that have been found of giant skeletons, and there are people with gigantism today as living proof that giants did exist at one point in time or another.
For example, like Shaquille O'Neal, who's 7'1".
Oh, he's not even the biggest. I've
Well, I'm talking.
You were saying, Sarah.
there's a channel on YouTube called Bright Insight, and I've shared this channel with Zach before. And the guy who does that channel, Jimmy, he did an episode that was focused on giants. And he brought up there was a guy that the guy that lived. He was 8 feet tall, and he only lived to be I think late 20s, early 30s. I don't quote me on that. Just because like his body couldn't support, like the blood flow and stuff because he was so big.
All right, I have heard of a man who grew up to be 12 feet tall, and I think he was recorded to be the tallest man in the world.
Yeah, and that's what again was I was talking about. If the gene was passed down, the reason their bodies can't support this gene is because they weren't meant to. They're not giants themselves or the direct offspring. They were later descendants who got the gene, and so they're not able to fully support the lifestyle. Essentially, they're the way of being.
Yeah, because I watch a lot of shows on TLC, and they love to do shows about people with dwarfism, and they have all these health problems, and they just don't live as long usually because of it.
Yeah. Is that all you have found for giants?
And that's pretty much all I have for that.
That brings us to the bull man, the Minotaur.
Before we move on really quickly, I did want to mention that when that show that I mentioned earlier, Mythical Beasts, they did a segment on Giants / Cyclops 2, and we were doing talkback for that, and I kind of had the idea, because they wanted to boast the idea that giants or Cyclopses were really into cannibalism. And if you want to go that route, it kind of makes sense that you don't see them anymore, because if they were, let's say that if they were cannibal and they were also inbreeding with the other Cyclopses or giants or whatever, they would effectively almost completely close off the gene pool to outside sources, which could lead to a lot of deformities and health problems, and they could eventually kill themselves off that way.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Now we are at the Minotaur.
So I'm gonna start off with the general mythology for this one. He has the body of a man and the body of a bull, and he was born on the island of Crete, and he was the child of Queen Pasiphae. There's a funny story behind it, because Queen Pasiphae was pretty much just the victim, because it was the king who sacrificed a bull to Poseidon, and so he asked for another one to sacrifice again, and so Poseidon sent him this white, beautiful, majestic bull, and the king saw how beautiful it was and chose not to sacrifice it. So Poseidon got angry and had the queen fall in love with the bull instead.
Huh.
And
Wow.
Queen Pasiphae went to this ancient crafter, Daedalus, and Daedalus crafted her this his own beautiful wooden bull, um, and it was so beautiful that it attracted the other white bull, and Queen Pasiphae hid inside of it, and I'm pretty sure you can imagine the rest.
Oh my god. Yeah, we definitely don't need to talk about that part.
um, uh, so the king went to Daedalus again and asked him to build this extensive labyrinth, so big and complicated that no one or no thing could escape from it. And so he did, but then of course he got him afterwards. He built it. Him and Icarus got imprisoned within it, and that's an entirely different mythology story. Um, but later, King Minos' son was killed by Athenians, so he declared war on them, and he won. And their punishment was every 9 years they had to sacrifice 7 young men and 7 young women to get pretty much eaten by this bull. They were its food source
Wow.
for the 9 year run anyway. I'm pretty sure he had a different food source in between times because there's no way anything could
Yeah.
survive 9 years without food. So the Athenian prince Theseus